going to be there?
Probably, yeah. Do you need me on it, or you just want the slides?
It's up to you.
Whatever works best for you guys. I'm known to wander around a little bit, but not too bad.
There we go.
All right, last call for a little bit for the bathroom. More tea, more water, more ice. We fixing the kick off.
Sorry, I wasn't sure. I was just making sure all this stuff was
No, you good? Are you good?
Yes, I'm good.
Glad y'all enjoyed it. Good. Glad y'all liked it. Good. Okay. I know. Send it to them. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our fourth night of this Forage Masters. I'm just going to give a quick introduction and turn it over to Miss Carol. This is Carol Knight. She was an extension agent for about 16 or 17 years, and now for the last month or so, she's been our new 4-H livestock specialist. So we're real happy about that. She has a cow background and a show cow background. Her dad has been here many times, Ray Higgs, if you remember him. She used to be Carol Higgs, and I can't help but tell that. Yeah. But anyway.
You don't have any other secrets.
I'll tell her if she does. Anyway, I'm just going to ask you to turn your attention to Carol, and as always, feel free to question her, and don't leave till you get figured out what you came to figure out tonight. Carol?
All right, awesome. Well, good evening, and thank you. My compliments to whoever cooked dinner. That was delicious. I sure appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's see. You guys have had an introduction to forages. Y'all have done, let's see, pest management.
And grazing management.
And grazing management. Okay, awesome. Well, this is a great spot. I think next week y'all will get the hay production section, which this is, to me, a great place to put this talk about forage quality. Of course, all of us that do this program always think that our topic is the most important. Well, I think my topic is the most important. And you'll see why. We'll harp on it a good bit. But the goal of this session is we're going to talk about a basic understanding of forage quality and then how we determine and measure that. We're also going to talk about management changes that we can do to improve forage quality, not only in the pasture, but if we're producing preserved forages, hays, and baleages as well. We're going to describe how to collect and how those forage analysis that I'm sure Tammy harps on you about getting, how you read those. And then the last but certainly not least, how are we going to use that to strategically feed or supplement our livestock, okay? Is everybody in here cattle production? Do we have any other kind of livestock represented? Horses, awesome, okay. Okay, cool. So, it helps if I turn my technology on. So what is forage quality? If we were to go around this room and ask a couple of different folks, like, what is forage quality? We're probably gonna get a lot of different answers. Because it's often, it's a simple concept, but there's a lot of things that go into determining that. So a lot of times it's misunderstood, and there's a lot of complex pieces, and we're going to talk about those pieces and how those fit together. So to define forage quality, that's the extent to which a forage has the potential to produce an animal response. So in beef cattle, our animal response is we want them to gain weight. We want them to breed. We want them to be healthy. In horses, that might be performance, right? We want to be able to, for them to ride, or if they're a draft animal, to pull. So in dairy production, that's going to be milk, right? That's what we want that animal to do. So the extent to which that forage does that for us. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And the first one is palatability. So this is, will the animal actually eat the forage? So animals select one forage over the other based on smell, feel, and taste, just like we do, right? So we like certain foods over certain else. If we had laid that chocolate delight out next to a bowl of bran flakes, I know which one everybody's going to pick, right? Because it tastes better, it has a better mouth feel, you know, all of those things, that's palatability. So animals select forage based on those same things. So it can be influenced by texture, leafiness, the amount of fertilization, manure or urine patches, moisture content, pest infestations, or different compounds that cause that forage to taste sweet, sour, or salty. So we talk about baleage, right? It goes through a fermentation process. Some folks love that smell. I used to work at a dairy in college, and I loved the smell of silage. I thought it was awesome. But you know, that smell entices cattle. They think it's wonderful. It makes them eat better or eat more because of that. Not necessarily that it's better forage, but that they like the smell of it. Okay, so our second factor is intake. So how much will they actually eat? So animals must be able to consume quantities of that forage to perform well. And there's things that will affect that, including fiber content, and we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So our third factor is digestibility. So how much of that forage will actually be digested? Digestibility is the extent to which that forage is absorbed as it passes through the animal's digestive tract. And this is greatly dependent, again, on that fiber content and that plant's maturity. And we'll talk about how that's related as well. So our next puzzle piece is nutrient content. So once that forage is digested, will the forage provide an adequate level of nutrients? So nutrient content is going to vary greatly between forages, and certainly our animal requirements are highly variable. So our animals, depending on, even within species, depending on what sex they are, what level of production they're in, it's going to depend on how many nutrients they need to take in to perform. Next is our anti-quality factors. And so these are various compounds that can lower animal performance. Sometimes they cause animals to get sick or even can die. And these include things like tannins, nitrates, alkaloids, estrogens, mycotoxins, and all of those things can be factors or found in our forages. And then our last, of course, is our animal performance. And we talked about this. This is our ultimate test of forage quality. Will they actually perform as we want them to? Weight gain, feed efficiency, milk production, calves born, and stamina are all examples of those. So all of these things really come together to give us kind of an understanding of what forage quality is. We want all of those to meld to give us a quality forage. So how do we measure that? So there's a couple of different ways. I do mention a physical evaluation. So just looking at a forage. And there's a lot of things you can tell from a forage just by looking at it. Now, if I looked at a forage, I cannot tell you what the TDN percentage is. I can't tell you what the crude protein is. I can't tell you anything about it. But there are certain things I can glean from it. And that is, one, what species of plant is represented. So I can tell you, is it a Bermuda baby, or is it more of a legume species? I can't tell you if it's higher quality, but maybe that particular species has the potential to be of higher quality. The maturity of the hay can also be visually assessed. So the number of seed heads and blooms, the stiffness and fiberness of the stems that are actually in that hay can give you some indication of how mature it is. Leafiness is also important. So the higher the leaf content, usually the higher quality, because the leaf is where a lot of your nutrients are held. The texture is also something to take into consideration. Is that forage soft or is it what we would consider harsh, so dry, stemmy, unpleasant to the touch? And then color. Color a lot of times sells hay, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the quality. What it does tell you is how quickly that forage was harvested and protected post-harvest, okay? So you can have a really high-quality hay that maybe doesn't look the part. You can have a really green hay that might not be as good of a quality, okay? And then odor, we talked about that. Dust, foreign materials, all of these things can affect that physical appearance. I know anybody who's ever done round bales knows sometimes you find some Earl squares too. Some really odd things in a hay bale sometimes that you end up rolling up inside of them. All of those things can maybe affect the forage quality. But what we're really going to focus on today is just this other side, is this chemical analysis. So this is when you send the hay off to a lab. This is really going to give you the nuts and bolts of is that hay a quality hay. So here we are, physical examination. Which one is the better hay? And if I was at first glance to look at this, I would say the one on everybody's right. But we don't know that for certain, right? Actually, and I don't think I have the analysis that they used on this slide, but they're pretty similar in quality, actually. So the color really doesn't do you. So we kind of need to look at hay more like this, okay? In black and white, as if they're the same color. Maybe take some of that stereotype that we look at when we see hay out of the equation and really focus on that chemical evaluation. So physical evaluation does not replace the chemical analysis, so because we cannot visually estimate those nutrients, and we certainly cannot catch potential problems just by looking at it. So things like nitrates, that's a biggie, right? We cannot look at that hay, we can't smell it, we can't do anything to it physically to tell if it's going to have a nitrate problem. The only way to determine that is through a chemical analysis. All right. So let's get to that chemical analysis. So a forage test, so this is what, I know you can't read that, we're going to look at some up close, but that's what it looks like when it comes from our university lab, and that's done through a certified forage testing lab. UGA is one, but there are others available. We're not sold on you, I mean, we would love for you to use UGA, but there's others that do that. And you see, there's various ways to take that. The best is through a core. I'm sure that Tammy has one of those in her office as well, and a cordless drill, but it drills into that bale, and you're able to take a representative sample. So just like a soil sample, you don't want to test one bale because that's not going to give you a very good representation of that whole field. So we need to be sure that we're coring several bales to put that together to get a good representation of what that hay cutting, or what the nutrient value of that hay cutting is. So let's talk about what happens after it gets to the lab. So how do they get all those fancy numbers once that gets there? So we're going to take a step back to, I don't know, what grade do we have biology in? 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that. Middle school biology, we'll take it there. So we're going to take a step back to middle school biology, and instead of looking at the forage sample as a whole, we're going to break it all the way down into one plant cell. So here is our plant cell, our forage plant cell, and it's made up of a couple of different components. And so one is the cell contents, you see up there at the top, so protein, oil, minerals, sugars, organic acids, and then we have the components of our cell wall, which are pectins, hemicellulose, cellulose, lignin, and silica. And so that cell wall is very fibrous and it's less digestible, okay? All the good stuff is on the inside of that plant cell. And so to determine the digestibility of our forage, there's a lab procedure that basically is going to divide these cell components and measure them, extract them and measure them, starting with the most easily removed components. So starting with our easily digestible. So our first step is called NDF, or neutral detergent fiber. And so these are removed, so they boil this in a neutral detergent, and the whole fibrous fraction that remains, which is this hemicellulose, cellulose, lignin, and silica, is all that's left. So it boils out all of this easily digestible stuff, and what you're left with are those four components. And so that is the NDF fraction that you get on a forage test. okay? And when we look at one, it'll make sense. So you have a percent NDF. And so those are those 4 things right there, which, because ruminant animals are so wonderful, they can digest some of this, right? That's what rumen microbes do. That's why we love ruminants, because they eat things that we can't. When we chew on a forage, we cannot digest that. We might get a little bit of those easily digestible things extracted out, but we can't survive on these other components, but ruminants can. Okay? So the next step involves boiling that part, the NDF part, in an acid detergent, which dissolves and washes away the hemicellulose component. And so that leaves the ADF, or acid detergent fiber. So you'll see on your forage test again, you're going to have an NDF percentage, you're going to have an ADF, which is acid detergent fiber. So this leaves the cellulose, lignin, and the silica components. And so that's further treated again with a stronger acid, and so what you end up being left with is just the lignin component, okay? So on your forage test, when you see it, you'll have an NDF percentage, an ADF percentage, and then a lignin percentage. So it breaks it all the way down. Now, why that is important that they take all of those things out, we talked about our rumen microbes being really good, right? So they're wonderful little bugs that live in the ruminant stomach that help them digest food. Cellulose and hemicellulose, they can digest. They can break down. Lignin, not even rumen microbes can break that down. That is some bad stuff, okay? And what happens is, as the lignin goes up, it inhibits the rumen microbes' ability to digest the other stuff, okay? So it will hinder their ability to digest the other fibrous components of that forage, okay? So it acts kind of as a barrier to those enzymes that break down the cellulose and hemicellulose. Okay, so let's get into some nuts and bolts. So here are 2 forage examples. Now, the first thing you'll see is that I have X'd out the as sampled category on this. We don't want to look at that, right? Because we want to take water out of the equation. So we always want to look at the dry matter components of our forage sample. That's the one that's really important and the one we need to pay attention to. So, couple of things. Let's talk about what we, do I have a pointer on this maybe? Oh, no, but I can cut it off. Sorry about that. Okay, maybe not. So, first things I want you to pay attention to is in the second here. I'm going to stand over here so I can actually point. In the second little category here, you'll see our NDF, our ADF, and our lignin, right? So that's what we just talked about, how they get those things, okay? So we see some definite differences in these 2 samples, don't we? So our top sample, sample number 1, our NDF is at almost 77%, ADF is at 44%, and our lignin is about 9.5%. Whereas down here in this sample, those numbers are a lot less, right? So the other things, oh, thanks, Siri. The other things that we're going to pay attention to when we start reading this, especially if we're balancing a ration, is going to be this total digestible nutrient number right here and our crude protein. Okay? Those are the 2 numbers we're going to balance rations off of. TDN, total digestible nutrients, that's the amount of energy that this forage has. That's what's most important. If you're feeding cows, like mature cows, TDN. Don't worry about protein, TDN. Energy is what's going to keep weight on those cows. Now, if you're feeding growing animals, for example, let's say you're growing out some heifers or something, we might need to go back and pay a little attention to what that protein level is, because protein is what's important for animals to grow, okay? So, other things to pay attention to. Just as point of note, notice the digestible dry matter difference in these 2 samples. This one is way higher because all of these things are lower, okay? More digestibility in this one than in this one, okay? Now, the other thing, and we're going to talk about RFQ here in a minute and what that means, but a quick way, if you didn't have any of this other information and somebody just gave you an RFQ, or you wanted one number to say, is this a high quality hay? This right here will tell you that. So 157 compared to a 49.1. It's a lot of difference, right? This is a much higher quality hay than this one. This one might be better than Snowballs, maybe. Mulch. It's probably like a mulch hay. This was actually a sample that was run in Bullitt County in about 2013. It rained all summer long. They got one cut towards the end of the season, and this is what they got left with. And it wasn't worth the fuel to go across the field. This one was put up really well. This is a nice, really good hay. You can almost sustain peak lactation cows on that without any other supplementation. 65% TDN, you're pretty close. Okay? All right. We're going to go into this a little bit further. I know that's a lot. It takes people years to learn how to read a forage test and how to, and I still get confused on some of it sometimes. But those are the numbers to pay attention to, okay? Especially if you're in the business of producing hay and you're wanting to improve that, those are the numbers that you're wanting to make improvements in to increase the quality. Okay, so what that means is, here is our dry matter intake, okay? So as fiber level goes up, okay, that NDF, to a certain point, we're good, and then as that fiber level starts to increase, our intake starts to go down, okay? So we're up here to meet intake needs, and then this is where intake is physically limited, like they just can't eat enough to get the nutrients that they need because the fiber level is so high, okay? So let's also add in our digestible energy intake, same thing, up to a level. As our fiber level gets higher, we just cannot get enough energy and nutrients into that animal because of that fiber level. Okay, so let's talk about crude protein. Lots of folks like to talk crude protein or market hay based on crude protein. And I'm not trying to say that crude protein is not an important part of the nutrition of our livestock, but it's certainly been overrated, okay? So crude protein in a forage or analysis is actually the total nitrogen. So it does not account for what form of nitrogen that protein is in, okay? So if you've ever looked at a forage sample that has high nitrates, guess what it also has? Very high crude protein. It's going to kill your cows, but they have lots of protein, okay? So we need to be careful about basing our analysis on crude protein, because you could have a really high crude protein hay that has no energy, your cows are going to lose weight because they don't have enough energy to put weight on, okay? What happens on everybody heard of the Atkins diet? Or, isn't it Atkins? Keto. No, the keto is what I'm thinking. Atkins probably does it too. The keto diet, right? That's the one everybody's on where all you eat is protein, no carbohydrates, right? What happens to people, what do they want for people to happen on the keto diet? Lose weight, right? So if we're only feeding our animals protein and we're not taking care of the energy, which is a carbohydrate, by the way, they're going to lose weight. And that's not really our goal in livestock production, is for our animals to lose weight. We want them to gain weight. Okay, so tells you nothing about the form it's in. So it could be amino acids, which are the good ones. It could be bound protein. It could be nitrates. Protein requirements are typically very easily met in our mature livestock. Only when we're feeding growing animals do we really have to start paying attention to meeting those requirements. Somewhat can be related to maturity of that forage, but we're going to talk about how, cutting at the right time is really important. But it tells you, it doesn't tell you anything about the energy content. So important, just a lot of people overemphasize that, okay? So if somebody tells you, oh, I got a high protein hay, you need to start asking some more questions about what else is going on, okay? Okay, I mentioned the RFQ number. So RFQ is relative forage quality. And RFQ is that total digestible nutrients times, it's a math problem, dry matter intake divided by 1.23. But what RFQ does is it simplifies comparisons. So it basically acts like a stabilizer where you could compare a spring annual baleage to a dry Bermuda grass hay, okay? Because this is just a standard number to look at, all right? So it predicts energy based on fiber quality and intake. An RFQ of 100 is roughly equal to full bloom alfalfa. So if you're above 100, and we call 100 kind of average, good enough, good. Okay, so anything above 100 is going to be above average and pretty good. Anything below 100, you're starting to fall below average. Okay? You know, we've pushed it, tried to educate folks, saying that it could simplify marketing. I mean, wouldn't that be great if everybody in the market bulletin selling hay would give you their RFQ so you could be like, yeah, I know which ones are good A's or not. Not everybody wants to make that public, maybe their RFQ isn't very good. But it does allow you to compare across forage species, which is the nice thing. And if you had one quick number to say, hey, what's the RFQ, that will give you a quick indication of, yeah, this is pretty good quality hay, or no, it's not. Okay? Questions?
So all hay will have a RFQ?
If it's analyzed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I say that if it's analyzed through UGA. Now, you will get through other labs something called a RFV, which is a relative feed value. It's figured a little different. So like you can't compare a relative feed value to a relative forage quality. But everything through UGA lab will have this, yes. Okay, so here's some examples of relative forage qualities compared amongst our common forages, and you see that is a range. So there's kind of like a max potential that a forage will get, where, you know, alfalfa, our queen of forages, right, she can get up there upwards of 200 RFQ really easily. Most of our legumes and our cool season annual grasses also can really, you know, reach that upper echelon. We get in here to some of our warm season perennials, Bermuda grasses. I've seen Bermuda grasses reach upwards of 150 pretty easily too if they're preserved correctly, okay? All right, let's talk about these anti-quality factors just a few minutes. Nitrate toxicity. Anybody ever had problems with nitrate toxicity? Yeah, we have. I mean, I'll be honest, I tout myself as an extension professional, and we lost a few cows a few years ago. We got in a hurry, we bought some hay, we didn't test it, we lost 3 cows. I mean, it was a bad deal. And even when we tested the hay, or what was left, because we'd already obviously put it out, it didn't come back like crazy. So, I mean, we're thinking we ran into a pocket of something, which it can happen. But we learned our lesson, right? So what happens is nitrate is reduced to nitrite by the microbes in the digestive tract, and then once it's in the bloodstream, it binds to the hemoglobin, and pretty much the animal suffocates from the inside out. So you'll see bluish mucous membranes, rapid and difficult breathing. This brown or chocolate colored blood is also a very primary sign of nitrate toxicity. It happens real fast most of the time. You know, there is some things that a vet could do if you caught it early enough, but most times we don't. We don't catch it early enough to save them, to get it taken care of. But that's a one, you know, you lose a couple animals like that, it makes that $20 forage test not seem quite so expensive, or take the time to actually take it. Some other... So there's a chart that tells you kind of what those nitrates need to fall in. Anything under 4,500 is A-okay. You know, you start getting up, you kind of have to watch how you feed it, but not saying that you can't, okay? So up to 6,500, you can limit feed that. Anything, I usually say anything over about 10,000, I would not even try. The good thing is, though, guess what? Horses are not ruminant animals. Nitrates do not affect them the way that it does cattle, so you can feed a high nitrate hay to horses if you needed a way to market it and try to move it if you had some. The other thing you can run into, and this is mostly probably more so on pastures than we run into with hays, is subclinical nitrate toxicosis. And so this is where you're kind of getting a small level of nitrates like over time. And so like if you have some open cows that go unexplained, or maybe reduced milk production or gain, this might be the culprit. But then again, you'd have to have, you know, a supply of nitrates out there in the pasture that they're getting a hold to that would explain it. So it is possible. Most all of our forage-related nitrate toxicity is acute, like it happens pretty immediately.
Sorry, do you know how long generally, I mean, like if you fed one bale, high nitrate stuff to your cows?
Mhm. It's gonna happen pretty, like within hours of them ingesting it. Yeah, it's quick.
Okay. I wasn't sure until like time for it to build up.
Well, no, I mean, if you fed like kind of back to this little chart, like if you were in kind of this mid-range and you fed it full feed, you're going to start getting some of that subclinical kind of, like an open cow slipping. I wouldn't do it to pregnant cows. Like you might have cows slip a calf. They're going to go off feed. They're going to have upset bellies kind of situation. But if it's lethal, it's going to hit them hard.
Okay.
Within hours, you'll see
I
signs.
guess what I'm thinking is like if you were to put out one bale and they were to eat that one in a couple days, would you necessarily see it? And then if you switched forage, would would
Yep.
the
If it's
nitrate
high enough.
hang around though if it's high enough and it was lethal, it would be
Yeah.
awful. But I guess I was thinking like dilution.
Well, yeah, so certainly, that's what we tell folks, this half ration, like if they were grazing winter annuals, but you wanted to feed some of this 45 to 6,500, you could feed this and they're grazing some, it basically dilutes it, is what that does, and limiting to part ration. That's what it's doing, it's diluting it and pushing it out of the system. Yep. Yeah.
What causes it to get to that point?
Nitrates?
Yeah, what does a farmer do
Sure.
wrong
So,
to get to that point?
yeah, so nitrates, high nitrates in a forage is caused by putting out fertilizer. Maybe it's really dry and all of a sudden you get a rain and that plant uptakes all of that nitrogen really quickly. A lot of times it happens in periods where we run through a drought and then we get a good rain, that forage jumps, and then we go out and harvest it. And so pretty much nitrogen has built up in the plant when we harvest it. And so it translates over into that preserved forage. So like I said, a lot of times it happens when we've run through, maybe we put fertilizer out, it didn't rain for a little bit, and we thought, well, it's not going to do anything. And then we get a rain and that plant goes, and it takes it up really quickly, and it's there, right? Instead of it being over time like we like for that nitrogen to do. Okay? Another reason to maybe split your nitrogen applications on your hay fields, like not put 200 pounds out in one shebang, like split those up over the course of your hay season so you're not putting so much out there at one time.
Can it be a problem? I assume it could be a problem, but like with ryegrass, if you're going to put out.
It can certainly be a problem on pastures as well, because the plant does the same thing if you turn them out there and it's uptake. The plant has uptaken all of that nitrogen, certainly. It's not just in preserve.